Welcome, my name is Josue Batista and this is a very special segment of What and Why First produced by Pittsburgh CDX. And I have with me Rob Coast and Jason Matthew. And the reason that we want your attention for a few minutes is because there is a special event happening in a few days here in Pittsburgh at the Rivers Club. And I want to let Jason explain in a moment what all that is about. But it's an event that you must be there. You must be part of it if you want to understand Agile and the implications of Agile in your business. Doesn't matter if you're in technology or not, Agile is applicable to a whole set of industries and fields. So I want to let Jason introduce the topic. And Jason, tell us what is going to happen in a few days. Tell us the date, the location, and what is the subject, and what and why people should be there.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Josue and Rob. Thank you for joining us here. So at the tail of, last few months ago, Rob presented on business architecture. So Agile kind of is a segue into a topic that was, well introduced by Rob. Agile has been, in the industry for many, many years. It's been taking a large evolution in time, moving from the basic Scrum type of models plugged into Scrum, and as well as extreme programming, different type of framework within Agile, and it has evolved now to Agile at scale. We'll talk a little bit about that during our event, which is taking place on June 18th at 12 in the afternoon. So, bring the folks near you, and as well as anyone that you know. It's a good social networking event here. I think it's very exciting. Many organizations, especially here in Pittsburgh, are now moving and migrating into Agile methodology. And it's a journey. It's not something that you plug and play. So, it's a journey, and it's a cultural change and shift. So it is seismic in nature. So we have to be very cognizant about the way that it is, as it changes the organization. It has a long-lasting impact, and I think it's rather exciting being here in Pittsburgh. I'm fairly new to Pittsburgh, about 4 years of tenure here in Pittsburgh. So I think being from outside of Pittsburgh, I see a lot of changes that have constantly been taking place, and there, many of the other, nationally, they're moving away from waterfall, or have already started this journey some 10 years ago. So it's interesting to see where Pittsburgh is right now.
What would you say are the gains or the benefits of Agile, like in a short, perhaps high level? And what would happen to an organization if they don't do Agile? Because I presume that is a decision that is not free, right? It has to be time, resources, money, investments in order to reach the Agile benefits. But what happens if you don't do anything?
Sure, yeah. So Agile, a decision not to do something is still a decision, right? So I think, one of the key things that many organizations are struggling with is the speed to market, right? They are constantly, evolving on their technology, their landscape and technology, as well as the speed to market. And as you think about it, what is occurring right now in the market is that everything in the market is a prototype. So when you think about, just a simple example of a product such as TurboTax, it never sits still on the shelf. So they're constantly evolving. So every year there's a new release, and they're constantly releasing new, new concepts into the market, as well as new upgrades. And when you think about the counterpart to Agile, which many folks call waterfall, but essentially it is a plan-driven approach. There's no such thing as waterfall, it is plan-driven. It takes time. The evolution of that software model takes time. So you're essentially waiting a long period of time in an incremental fashion, for the software to reach a tester's, space for them to test the software. And that might take anywhere from 6 to 12 months before a software tester or a QA analyst has an opportunity to assess how robust this software is, how, is it performing up to speed, is the functionality of the software meeting the needs of the business criteria. Additionally, if there are any changes that needs to occur, you essentially are waiting a timeline of 6 months or a year before you can make and adapt to those new changes. And it depending on the type of industry you're in, there could be a lot of legal implication, there could be a lot of legislative changes that needs to account for in the next release. And you really don't want to wait 6 months before you implement that piece of the code.
So it seems that it goes back to the concept of, well, I know that it's overstated, agility, right? I think that also illustrates how important is our vision for digital transformation, right? Because the future is going to demand a significant amount of flexibility. I call it leapfrogging into new ways of delivering value. And it doesn't matter if the value is internal or external, right? Engaging customers, or even internal engagements that you have within the organization. So it makes sense to me that from what I heard, that if you apply Agile, you're going to be more nimble, you're going to have the ability to test. Remember, Rob, that we always talk about those testing hypotheses for value and for growth. Right? You always have to test for those two, and the faster you can do that, the better you can adjust your strategy. Because the strategies are not fit in stone, they have to be flexible, they have to be adaptable to react to the ecosystem, to the regulations, to everything that is going on around every organization.
So Jason, earlier, as you introduced the topic, you suggested that this wasn't a sudden sunrise, it wasn't an event, it was a process in taking on Agile methodologies inside of a company. Can you elaborate on how that happens? Can you say a little bit more about that? And then the thought that crossed my mind as you were tapping people on the shoulder is, what distinguishes Agile from chaos, right? If everyone's tapping each other on the shoulder, how does anyone get anything done? Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. So cultural change, as with any organization. I mean, I like to simplify Agile as the fact that over time we have complicated Agile. I like to make it very simple by saying Agile is all about an organization that looks at their goals instead of a specific role. It's the ability for an organization or a team of people to come in and say, we're going to do more of what works for us and less of what doesn't. And I like to, characterize Agile in that, with that simplicity term or that statement there, because over time we've complicated it. We have bastardized a lot of the way that we've looked at metrics, and we're the way that we are punitive towards our developers and testers and our core teams. But if you think back at that statement, that helps kind of put retrospective in perspective that in every increment, when you deliver a value to a client, you're going to take a look in the rear view mirror and see what has worked for the team and what has not worked for the team. And Agile is about a journey. You have to bring the leaders, the C-level positions have to be in alignment, and if nothing else, they have to understand what Agile is all about, and it's about a cultural change. If they're not well informed, well positioned, you're not going to see the success of Agile into its full fruition. There's a question that I get posed with quite often. Is there a model? Is there a specific, a map that from an Agile transformation that we can step by step follow? Yeah, there are some guidelines, but when you think about it, there isn't something in the industry that resonates exactly one way with Google that it does with Intuit or another organization. Every organization has to embark on this journey, and it will look very different. So you're going to take some of the key principles of Agile, whether it's Scrum methodology or extreme programming or test-driven development type of framework, and you're going to start inserting some of the key components of what works for that organization. So I like to, be an advocate for meeting the company where they are in their agile journey. If you don't do that, then you're trying to force and infringe upon an organization that has over 30, 40 years of cultural backing to, change suddenly. And that suddenly is not going to come into any type of tangible fruition. So I think it's a journey. You start with the journey from recognizing that, yes, we need to start this journey. Here is where we are. Here are the type of things that our leaders want to see changing, because our customers are asking for these expectations. We are doing this for the customers. We are not doing this for ourselves. We're trying to help the customer recognize that value of a particular piece of software or any type of implementation or a product that you're releasing into the market. So I think those are some of the key challenges. Is that one, leadership needs to be aware and fully, not just be aware, but fully involved. And if the involvement is not there, then they're not going to, be able to embark on this journey. And number two, one of the other key things that I see in organizations is that, when you become stagnant, what tends to happen is what Forrester calls a water scrum fall. Right? It's they've tokenized that word, I think, back in 2011 or so, and you get stuck there without knowing what else to do, because if you are trying to only change internally within your own organization without having that change drastically, permeate its way through the client and helping them understand why Agile is important, you're going to get stuck there with that water scrum fall methodology in your organization.
Right. And I like you introduced the concept of commitment, right? Involvement. The key to commitment is involvement, right? So it's not sufficient for leaders in organizations to just on the surface get just the lingo, right? The vocabulary. They need to understand what the value of that is. And I really challenge leadership, especially the people who are not in DevOps, the people who are not the software organization, the IT organization. They need to understand what Agile is, because it's not about the software. It's not about the application or the testing necessarily. There is a whole ecosystem that every organization interacts with, an ecosystem of stakeholders, internal, external. All of them can benefit from Agile or suffer tremendously if not implemented properly. It actually, I can probably say from experience, because I've seen it in some organizations, like you said, that they get stuck in that kind of limbo, in kind of that purgatory, right? They are not waterfall entirely, they are not Agile entirely, and they have this mix that creates more aggression, that creates more excessive complexity, and actually it's a recipe for disaster. So the commitment aspect has to come from leadership, right? And not necessarily from the IT organization, because I believe the IT organization in most cases, frankly, I know that plenty of IT leaders probably are listening to this, but frankly, they are so busy sometimes with all the technology that they have, busy with all the commitments and the complexity that exists, that they may not have the resources, the time or the effort to implement Agile properly. So it has to come from another place. It has to come from an organization. And that is actually something that I believe you, as an expert on Agile, are going to bring at least the idea of a plan, right? What can organizations do now, and depending on whatever state they are? If they are not in Agile at all, what are the steps to get started? I think you're going to provide some of that during the conversation on the 18th, right? And if they are in that limbo state, what would be the ways for them to break away from that and become more Agile centric? And if they're already in a good path, what are the best lessons that they have learned, right? That would be an excellent opportunity for us to understand what are they doing well. And that is part of what we want to do from Pittsburgh CDX, help organizations in the Pittsburgh area and globally, because this video is going to be seen all over the world, in terms of creating value, using digital transformation, using technology, innovation, leadership to create value. That I think that is the whole purpose. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Rob. And friends, you are going to see a few communications from us, from Pexport CDX and What and Why First, related to this event. So please just follow the links. Most likely there's going to be a registration form on our website, the Pexport CDX. And we need a registration form so we can set the venue properly in terms of the attendance. So we want you to be comfortable. And it is at the Rivers Club. Rivers Club is at the Oxford Center in downtown Pittsburgh. It's a beautiful facility. The food is great. So lunch is on you. We are in charge of the event. Jason is going to be preparing an awesome presentation. The lunch here is fantastic. It's always good. So I will look forward to seeing you here. Tuesday, the 18th. Come up before noontime so you have time to do the registration, get your food, and then get with the program. Jason, Rob, thank you so much for being here and in this special event of What and Why First, produced by Pexport CDX. And until next time, cheers.